Commissioner Brenda Cassellius of the Department of Education joins me now to talk a little bit about what's next for charter schools. Commissioner, thank you for joining us on the set.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Let's begin with the recent anniversary. It was the 20th anniversary of the passage of charter school legislation. Do you think 20 years later that charter schools are reaching the goal of high student achievement?
Well, I think that's the question that we have to answer, is around achievement. We have some of the highest performing schools that are charters, and some of our lowest performing schools are charters. And so we really wanted to put a strong focus on achievement being their number one goal, next to innovation. And so they were kind of created to innovate and to be an incubator for new ideas on how we could better educate students. And but we haven't been learning from those high performers, and that's really what we've been trying to do and put our emphasis on, is how do we learn from those high performing charters and move forward around quality and make sure that any charter school that's out there is a great one.
How does protecting the welfare of charter schools fit in with the governor's overall task of maintaining a healthy K-12 education system?
Well, charters are part of our K-12 system, and the governor has a strong interest in charters, but really high quality charters. We just recently wrote for a charter replication grant with the federal government, got $28.2 million to replicate high performing charters. So we are really interested in that, and also the role that authorizers play in their oversight of charters and ensuring that they're looking at the business operations as well as the academic operations so that they're good fiscal stewards, as well as providing a high quality environment for learning.
You talked a little bit about the role. I want to know more about the role of the Department of Education in overseeing charter schools, particularly after the 2012 legislature removed a requirement that charter school board members' training programs would be approved by MDE. Do you find that MDE should have a greater authority in the oversight of charters?
Well, you know, we have authorizers and they oversee charters, and so we have greater oversight, and we're now we're exercising our oversight of authorizers, and you know, we get a complaint about a charter and we work with authorizers to resolve it. We think they're the ones who have the largest responsibility. However, having said that, we do still train charters. We work with charter directors, we work with authorizers, and we provide technical support, not only from the application process, but all the way through to ensure quality. And we're looking at those evaluation systems from our authorizers when they do evaluate the programs, so that we can ensure that they're high quality. It's something new. It's something that we've just started working on in the new administration, and so we think that that's going to help us to ensure that every single charter is high quality.
Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about former state senator Ember Reichgott-Young. She authored the charter school legislation 20 years ago, and she contends that even now traditional schools have had to essentially be more responsive to teaching methods that are used in some of the successful charter schools, and therefore the two kind of complement one another. Would you agree with this?
Well, that may be her perspective and what she's seen. In my 23 years of educating and working in education, I have not seen a real intentional sharing between charters and traditional public. That's fairly new. We see some now intentional sharing happening with Minneapolis public schools and St. Paul public schools with some of their charters, but there hasn't been an intentional sharing, and I think that's where we need to get to, is that if they're really going to be an innovative kind of R&D arm, that we look at what those high performers are doing and learn from them. But I don't think that that has historically been how they have worked, even though I think it was a good intent.
And there is some legislation now to encourage that sharing. How do you facilitate this, the communication between a traditional school district and a charter school?
Well, I think the main way we're going to do it right now is through our charter replication grant. So we're going to be able to audit and inventory and look at those high-performing charters. We'll also be able to do it as part of our new waiver system and our new improvements. So if we have reward schools and those who are celebration eligible, we'll be able to go in, look at what those practices are, and then share those across hallways, across districts, and get teachers really sharing those best practices. So that's more intentional now as part of our waiver, and then we'll replicate those high-performing charters as part of their application for those grant funds.
Commissioner, for lack of a better phrase, what's good for the goose isn't always good for the gander. So how can you replicate some of what is successful in charter schools without maybe taking away from some of its autonomy? Do you think that what's working in one school is going to work in some of these other schools?
Well, I think with the replication, it's not necessarily replicating in a traditional, but it's also replicating in the charter environment. So they may, for instance, Hiawatha Academy is probably going to apply for expansion, and they'll expand grades. So they'll be replicating their model, but at higher grades. So we may see some of those models replicate, but they'll still be charters. So we won't be taking away any of their autonomy. Now, in terms of traditional public replicating some of their work with turnaround, they will probably look at some of those autonomies, and we do have a new law that we passed last year with collaboration and districts collaborating with charters, and they can apply to have certain autonomies, and those are commissioner approved. And so we'll look at those individual applications as we encourage districts and charters to collaborate.
In January of 2012, the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools placed Minnesota second in the nation for charter schools. So we dropped from number 1, and it cited a potential area of improvement, working to provide better access to facilities and capital funds. Do you think it's important to kind of level the financial playing field between charter schools and traditional schools with some of that, the levy money in particular?
Yeah, we're doing some work with our budget finance group right now to level the playing field for all schools. We think that we have an equity problem here in Minnesota, and the disparity has grown among school districts in the amount of per pupil funding that they get. So overall, charters are in that mix when we're looking at our budgeting. And so yes, we need to do funding systems for charters, but we also need it for our traditional publics as well.
How would you like to see charter schools evolve under this administration?
I would really like to see our lowest performing charters get better or no longer exist, or have investment in our high performing charters and replicate those high performing charters. With our focus is totally on achievement and on what we can learn from those charters and what innovative models they're using. Many times our charters look much like our traditional public schools, and they actually function much like a traditional public, and they're not as innovative as we hoped. So I'd like to see a little bit more innovation happening at those charters, and then a more intentionality from us and district traditional public schools to work collaboratively with our charters to be able to try some new things that haven't been tried before.
Where will charter school policies, or policies geared towards charter schools, where do they fall on kind of the priority list as you prepare for the 2013 legislative session?
Well, as I think about charters, I think about them as public schools. So I don't think charters separately than public schools. So anytime, and they're synonymous to me, I don't think of them as an anomaly. They're part of our school system and have been for 20 years. So they have just as much as importance as any other school to me. And so I think that that's where they sit in terms of value and priority. Is if a student is at a public school and they're not getting the kind of education that they need to get, then we need to do something about it, whether it's charter or public.
Okay, with those words, Commissioner Brenda Cassellius, thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report set.
Thank you very much, Julie.